Welcome, welcome, welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Tuesdays and Thursdays with CarePatrol. We're so glad you made time for us today. And I think in a lot of ways, you'll realize that you've made time for yourselves, and we appreciate you for doing so. As you know, we've done ethics presentations our entire month, and we've saved what I think is the best for last. And we're doing the ethics of self-care. And we're very pleased to be joined by Dr. Chandler Caldwell, who is going to present this as himself a social worker. So self-care for the social worker from the perspective of a social worker himself. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Caldwell, and I think his clients call him either Dr. Chandler or Dr. Caldwell, and I'm sure he answers to both and would even answer if you didn't call him doctor, but he's earned that title this year, and proud of him doing that. He is going to teach us about the ethics of self-care. And I want to say to you all, some of you all who may be joining, Ronicia, can anyone else not hear? Let me check my mic. Okay, Kate, you can hear. So some people can hear. So I'm going to keep talking. It may be an issue with your feed, folks, but I believe others can hear. So I mistakenly advertised this as necessary for renewal in the state of Alabama. And I was informed by the executive director yesterday in a very gracious and kind way, I must say, that I was wrong and I was mistaken. And this is not necessary for renewal for anyone who is a social worker. So if you are here under that suspicion, it's because of me being mistaken and saying the wrong thing. And I must apologize and ask your forgiveness. This is not necessary for renewal, but I do think it's necessary for you as a social worker, and even for you as a nurse or you as another clinician. It's necessary because self-care is necessary, and we're going to find out more about that. I will tell you a little bit about our housekeeping as we settle in, and I'm admitting more folks. So as y'all know, we are accredited by the Board of Social Work for the state of Alabama and by the Board of Nursing for the state of Alabama. And each of them credentials us and allows us to provide these contact hours. Nurses' hours will be uploaded to the ABN website as soon as I can get to it. And I apologize, I did not do it this weekend as promised. I apologize for that as well. But I will get to it, and everyone will get a certificate this evening. I will lock our survey this evening at 8 o'clock. So you have until after hours to get to it, but after 8 o'clock tonight, it will be locked. I am now printing the survey link into the chat room. Please pull the chat room up on your screen if you can. The link for today for our evaluation, which will be due after Dr. Caldwell speaks, is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/ all uppercase G as in go 7 9 Q N as in Nancy W 7. And there were quite a number of you who joined as I was going through that address. I'm sure more will be joining shortly, but I will give it one more time and again at the end. The address for our evaluation after today is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/ all uppercase G as in go 7 9 Q N as in Nancy W 7. That's our Survey Monkey link for today. It is password protected. I will give out the password about 45 or 50 minutes into today's presentation. If you don't mind, Dr. Caldwell, I'll interrupt you to do so. I will then also let everyone know that you are able to unmic. So Dr. Caldwell would love for this to be more of a discussion type environment. You all know, some of you, Alexis Pullins, I don't know if you can see the chat room, Chandler, but she says she's nice to see you were her teacher in the MSW program. So I'm sure you have other fans online. We have so many people joining. So I'm going to give them just another minute, but let everyone know, once again, we have a survey tool, Survey Monkey. The address is in the chat room. I'll put it in the chat room throughout today. It's password protected. And we'll give out the password about 45 or 50 minutes into the presentation. You have the ability to unmic, or unmute rather, your mic. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and unmic. And when you can, work in a question for Dr. Caldwell. I believe we've got enough folks in here now, and it's about 6 minutes after that. Oh, you got some fans. You got some fans already in the chat. Thank you, folks, for speaking to Dr. Caldwell and making him feel welcome. And now I will turn it over. Y'all know, well, let me say one thing about the fella. I've known him for, I think he says 4 or so years. We met at UAB West. He was working there as a social worker. And I don't know that he referred a great number of patients to me, but I knew from the beginning that he was someone to know and to keep knowing. And I'm somebody, I like to collect people who I find to be, you know, talented and interesting and driven and going places. And he's one of those people. And he enjoys teaching, loves teaching, and also likes to put into practice what he teaches. And this is what I admire about him. It's what we sometimes say about people of faith, is that he walks the walk, and he talks the talk and he walks the walk. So he walks what he says. He does what he's teaching you to do. And I hope you'll listen, because today's topic is self-care. So I'm going to mute now. Dr. Caldwell, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sean. I'm so happy to be here, and it's great seeing so many people I know. I was, scrolling through the list of folks that have logged on, and I see at least a dozen or two that I have known throughout my time in the field. And so today we're going to talk about self-care as an ethical responsibility. So if you do not know me, why is this? Okay. My name is Chandler Caldwell. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. I recently finished all of my doctoral requirements at the University of Alabama. So I will be graduating in August. So I'm still getting used to people calling me Dr. Caldwell, and Dr. Chandler has a nice ring to it though. And I'm currently the director of behavioral health at Capstone Rural Health. We have 6 clinics in Walker County. And I also teach at Alabama and at UAB. So just some objectives for today, so we kind of know where we're headed, is I want us to be able to define burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. And then I also want us to understand the changes that have been made to our code of ethics about self-care. And then we're going to talk about how to apply concepts of self-care. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end to have a big group discussion. I was going to use a feature on Zoom called the breakout rooms, but it does not seem to be appearing today. So we will just make the best of it. So what are some of the common issues that social workers experience in the field? The biggest one is stress. So no matter what area of social work that you work in, whether you're in mental health, you're in child welfare, you work in healthcare, or you're doing macro level work, stress is going to happen. And stress is really defined by our body's response to a lot of pressure. So a lot of different events, a lot of different experiences can cause that stress. And it can be triggered when we experience something new, unexpected, or something that threatens our sense of self. And this is especially true when we feel like we have little control over a situation. And in social work, one thing that's important to remember is we don't have control over a lot of the situations that we're in with clients. And every day is something new and something different. So stress is just a natural part of what we do. So although stress can be a good thing, which we all know what that is, you've got stress that causes you to study for a test, causes you to get to work on time, causes you to eat better because maybe your health is declining. We've got good stress, and we wouldn't be able to function without that healthy stress. But too much stress can have really poor effects on us as people, but also as professional social workers. And it can really leave us in that fight or flight mode where we really have difficulty coping. And the long-term effects of that have both physical and mental health consequences. And if those aren't resolved, then that can lead to what we've all heard about is burnout. And when I was writing my research for my doctorate, one comment that they gave me was, you need to define what burnout is. And that's a really good question. What is burnout? How do we know that we're burned out? And burnout's really defined as a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So we've all been burned out. We've all had those periods in our journeys as social workers where we're just like, I don't know how much more of this I can take. The system's broken. We have very little resources. A lot of times we're not paid fairly. Burnout is a very common theme among most social workers at some point in their career. So next is compassion fatigue. So this is where, we lose the ability to really empathize and have compassion for others. This is where we are so burned out, so stressed that we really can't put ourselves in other people's shoes. And so, like this part or the slide says, compassion fatigue is a condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, leading to diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others, often described as the negative cost of caring. And this is something that we really want to avoid. When you get to compassion fatigue, it's very hard to climb out of that hole. If you get to that kind of burnout phase, you can turn that around. But when you start having compassion fatigue, it's much harder to pull out of that hole. So we really want to try and avoid that if at all possible. And then stress and vicarious trauma. So, vicarious trauma is basically where you are exposed to trauma indirectly from your clients or patients. And if we don't have appropriate self-care plans or strategies in place, then this secondary trauma can really, really do some harm to us as social workers. Now, depending on where you work, you may not experience as much of this. But for a lot of us, trauma is a big part of what you do. It may be physical trauma, it may be trauma related to mental health. It can vary depending on where you work and what your practice setting is. But regardless, having a good self-care plan is important to avoid being traumatized by that secondary or indirect trauma. So this is just a little graphic that kind of talks about the progression. So say that you do have a client that has trauma and you're working with them for a long time or a brief time, but it's a very intense interaction. Then you've got this, stress building, and then you've got compassion fatigue, and then you burn out. And that's really not what we want in our professional careers. So to help understand how stress affects the brain and how to tell the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout, we're going to watch two short videos. I think each are about 4 minutes a piece. And then we will see. Sean, can you see this? Can you see YouTube? I can't hear you. I just need to know if I need to reshare the screen. Let's see. Hey, Ann.
Yes, you reshare.
Okay, reshare. Okay. All right, we got it. Okay.
Chandler, we can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
I can't. I barely hear it.
Let's see. Reactions. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, I want to start it over since. Sorry, Bob.
That's good.
Restlessly, feeling irritable, forgetting things, don't look. You're probably just stressed. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like
Can't hear it again.
I'm not sure why. I guess just follow along with the subtitles. I guess we'll make it work that way.
Okay. Share the sound button. That I don't know how to do. Let me see. If I make you the host.
This strength.
All right. So as you can see, stress has a physical and a chemical reaction in the brain. Our brains can change because of those cortisol levels. And so stress isn't just something that, you know, our body experiences and it'll just go away. It's something that we have to proactively take care of in order for us to recover from it. And if we don't, there's long-term consequences that we really want to avoid. So there's one more video. If we can, I don't think there's subtitles on this one, so I'd really like it if y'all could hear it. So Sean, tell me if y'all can see. Making videos work on Zoom is always a struggle.
Yeah, I tried making you the host. That didn't seem to work. I think what we were hearing was actually your speaker coming through your mic. That makes sense.
I gotcha.
So if you turned up your speakers, we could probably hear it.
Let's see.
But I don't see any other, like, anything under sound.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay. Well, we'll see if y'all can hear this, and then not, we can skip over it. So
okay.
Can you hear that, Sean? No,
not really. Trying to see.
Because the high level of care required to get through the day. Caring people end up feeling as if
now we can.
Because they simply
Can y'all hear it now?
So
They can hear it now.
okay, good. Okay, cool.
Let's start it over.
And that is compassion fatigue or burnout. In professions that require a high degree of caring, like nursing, there's sometimes discussion of compassion fatigue or the inability to continue to care because of the high level of care required just to get through the day. Caring people end up feeling as if they've lost themselves because they simply don't know how to care any longer. While compassion fatigue nursing is focused on compassion for the patient, compassion fatigue can impact anyone in any relationship where high degrees of compassion are required, including those where someone is caring for a loved one. The symptoms of compassion fatigue may look slightly different from burnout on the surface, but if you probe deeper, you find that compassion fatigue and burnout may not be different. While burnout and nursing has been associated with work, we can find ourselves burnt out by any aspect of our lives. Compassion fatigue depends upon where the environment is. The environment where care is critical. It's possible that you give more compassion than you have available. There's only so much energy that someone can get to help others without helping themselves. The fundamental trap that causes compassion fatigue is a focus on other people and their needs before focusing on our own self-care needs. It's even more effective needs that we happiness. So others are suffering.
The sound went away.
I'm curious why it's doing that because I'm not changing anything on my end.
I have no idea.
Well, guys,
is there closed captioning with the video?
Yes.
Where?
There we go.
Okay.
Where compassion fatigue sets in. One insidious process is accelerated is when you're helping others to heal yourself. If you were abused as a child, you might try to help other abused children, unconsciously hoping that if you save them, you can save yourself. Unfortunately, children in need keep coming, and the relief for your pain never comes. Reliving your experiences before you've had a chance to address them is a recipe for depletion and compassion fatigue. That's exhaustion, cynicism, and lack of efficacy. On the surface, this bears the resemblance to compassion fatigue. But actually, you see that compassion fatigue is a specific type of exhaustion. For people all the time, cynicism comes from the fact that you can't change the situation. Compassion fatigue doesn't come from the successes of the interaction and getting good results. It comes from getting this realization is that you can use the same techniques for recovering from burnout to address compassion fatigue. There are two symptoms for burnout. The bad symptom uses a pattern as a simple personal agency. Results support from others and self-care. Acknowledging your successes despite some Russian energy business. The sense of yourself. This is where unresolved childhood issues are a problem, because any person you help also aids the child inside you. You don't have to save everyone. It's not realistic. Instead of being able to celebrate successes, you focus on the child who you couldn't help. No one can find a pain, they don't have to. Compassion fatigue. The recipe for resolving compassion fatigue is hard, although implementing the change can be difficult. Focus on the positive results you get. Engage more people to support you. Do more self-care. And limit the demands of your personal agency. some classrooms can make that difficult or impossible to do. Gaining that awareness of why being consumed by the compassion offered to others, knowing that finding easy. Do you suspect that you will have sometimes connection with you? Don't have the resources. Organizations such as Competence for resources for counseling. You may also consider it.
All right, so that didn't go quite as planned. Oops. But when we're using technology, there's always room for some slip up. So thank you all for bearing with us. So what's the importance of self-care and its ethical implications? Why are we here today? Why have we been hearing about self-care from day one as social workers? I know when I was in school to become a social worker, it was taught that self-care was important. I have taught my students, both in the classroom and in internships, that self-care is important. But why? Why is it important? So it can help combat all the things that we've talked about: stress, burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. And all of that can lead to poor decision making, which we'll talk more about. And lack of self-care may cause undue stress. Over time, this impacts our ability to make ethical and sound decisions. So if you went to school to be a social worker prior to 2021, the field and your instructors were just giving you some good advice, basically, that self-care is important. As of 2021, self-care has actually been added to our code of ethics, which is new. And up until this point, we really didn't have an ethical obligation to practice self-care because it was not explicitly discussed in our ethical code, but now it is. So that language was added with the latest revision last year. So, you know, advocates really pressed hard for this. And because self-care is something that I think that we hear a lot about, but most of us are pretty bad at following through with. And that's something that I hope trainings like this can really encourage, is just to practice self-care, however small or big those plans are. But, you know, advocates really raised the standard on this by saying that self-care is a key component of ethical and professional excellence. And this really closely aligns with research saying that self-care is a great proactive measure that can prevent impairment, enhance job satisfaction, and keep us in the field longer. So one change that they made was that they added a whole paragraph to the purpose section of the Code of Ethics. So as you'll see, they added professional self-care is paramount for competent and ethical social work practice. Professional demands, challenging workplace climates, and exposure to trauma warrant that social workers maintain personal and professional health, safety, and integrity. Social work organizations, agencies, and educational institutions are encouraged to promote organizational policies, practices, and materials to support social workers' self-care. So right from the beginning in our Code of Ethics, the National Association of Social Workers is making it very clear that self-care is no longer something to just talk about in class or say, hey, I'm going to the beach once a year, that's going to suffice. This is basically saying that you have an ethical duty to take care of yourself mentally and physically. They also added one sentence to the ethical principle of integrity. So this one sentence refers to self-care. And if you don't remember, and this ethical principle is integrity, but social workers behave in a trustworthy manner. And so they added a sentence, as you'll see, it's italicized, that social workers should take measures to care for themselves professionally and personally. So, this is something that the field has been talking about for decades. And I know when I was in school, being trained as a social worker, I heard about self-care in probably every class. But the fact that it's in our ethical code now really makes you think twice about how we're actually putting our self-care practices into our daily lives. So some other ethical principles that the verbiage did not change on these, but I want you to just think about how self-care may impact these ethical principles. One is dignity and worth of the person. That's social work 101. And, social workers respect the inherent dignity and worth of the person. So if we're burned out and we do, and we are, or we're experiencing compassion fatigue, we're not really thinking about the worth and value of our clients, because we're to that point where we just don't care. And that's a very, very scary, scary place to be in. Also, competence. So, social workers practice within their areas of competence and develop and enhance their professional expertise. So, if you're burned out, if you are experiencing compassion fatigue, we're not really on our A game, and we may practice outside of our boundaries because, like I said earlier, we're not able to make those ethical and sound decisions. So I want you to just take a second and just think about how burnout and compassion fatigue can impact these two ethical principles, because it's pretty profound when you think about it. So a few of the ethical standards that I think burnout and self-care and compassion fatigue can really apply to almost any part of the Code of Ethics, but I wanted to touch base on these 4 ethical standards. So one is ethical standard 1.01, which is a commitment to clients. So our whole purpose, our whole existence is to improve the lives of the people that we work with. That is what we're here for. That's what we're expected to do. When we are burned out or we're experiencing fatigue or we're just exhausted, we're not able to really uphold that commitment to clients as well as we would if we were mentally and physically feeling well. Impairment of colleagues. So you may have someone that you work with that is burned out or has compassion fatigue, and they are obviously struggling. It's our duty to talk to that colleague and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help? What are some steps that we can take to get you out of this rut? Because impairment really does put our clients at risk for harm. And, may that be physical harm or, mental health harm. So we have to keep an eye on our colleagues as well. And then incompetence of colleagues, kind of the same thing. You know, when we're not able to think clearly, we're not making sound decisions, and there's ethical dilemmas popping up left and right, then sometimes our competence goes out the window, and we're not doing exactly what we should be doing. And the last one is just impairment. And this is probably the biggest one that is impacted by this topic, because when we are burned out or we are experiencing compassion fatigue, we are impaired. Being impaired does not mean that you are not able to get up and do your job. And impairment really means that you're not able to get up and do your job to the best of your ability. And that ultimately is what causes issues. And our whole purpose is to help and protect our clients. And when we're impaired, whether that be because of exhaustion or burnout or a lack of sleep or whatever it is, we're still risking the well-being of our clients because of that. And that's something that we need to examine very closely. So, did anyone know that the Council on Social Work Education actually has self-care in their list of competencies? So the first competency is demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. So if you have done an internship, you know, at least in the last 10 years, these have been really, really big, these competencies. They're, you know, pretty much the same across the board in the country. And this is how schools of social work evaluate if students are ready to complete a field placement, or are they ready to graduate and practice as a professional social worker. And one of the components of this competency in particular is demonstrate professional use of self with clients, including clinical reasoning, boundaries, self-disclosure, and there we go, self-care. So it's explicitly there. But it's not until recently that we've kind of been bound ethically to practice it. So, you know, like I have been saying, you know, the concern is for the protection of the client. Not only do we want to take care of ourselves, obviously, you know, we want to be happy, we want to be healthy, we want to enjoy the work that we're doing, but ultimately we want to protect our clients and we want to make sure that we're giving them 100%. And like I've mentioned, if the quality of service is impacted by the impairment, then your client is at risk for harm. And we do have the obligation to address impairment of colleagues. And we are definitely responsible for recognizing and addressing our own impairment. So how do we address this? And instead of just saying to you guys, hey, y'all, I think you should go to the beach once a year, or you should go for a walk once a day. I did a little digging and found an article, I think it was on the Social Work Today, the magazine's website, about how we can take care of ourselves. And the obvious ones are practice self-care, develop a reasonable plan, and stick to it. And self-care is more than just, you know, our mental and our physical. And as you'll see on this self-care wheel, this is kind of the balance of life. You've got your physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional aspects of who we are. And those are all aspects that we have to take care of. Let's see. Is it not? Okay. So the first component of creating a good self-care plan is that it needs to be individualized. So the term self-care in itself tells us that it should be an individualized thing. You know, not everybody is going to benefit from the same self-care practices, and it's not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. So you've got to think about what's going to work best for you. And to be successful in achieving these goals, you really need to try and devise a plan that takes into account your values, your personality, and your circumstances. If you're not a gym person, don't force yourself to go to the gym. If you don't like going for a walk, you don't have to go outside and walk. If you don't like reading, you don't have to read. Really think about what is going to work for you, because that perfect plan is going to be for you and you only. I can't tell you how many times I've told myself, I'm going to go to the gym because that's what I need to do. When in reality, I really just don't like going to the gym. And so my self-care plan always falls through because it's not something I enjoy. So integrated. So we've all heard about work-life balance. Well, that's hard to do sometimes. And the author that came up with this kind of outline just calls it life balance. And one of the myths about self-care is that it's something that we do after work, usually to deal with work stress. And it's not just about relieving stress. And like she points out here, this is how we kind of approach our work and approach our lives. It's not just another task on our list of things to do every day. This is kind of a way of living, and we have to integrate self-care into every aspect of our lives. So integrating it. Intentional. So we have to be intentional with our self-care plan. And what I mean by that is you have to literally carve out time in your day for self-care. Don't be trying to watch a TV show while doing notes at home. Don't, try and, just sip on some wine while you're trying to sign off on things on the computer. Put the computer away, be intentional, and say to yourself, for this next 30 minutes or for this next hour, this self-care is all about me. And the trick to that is to ensuring that you do that on a very routine basis. Structured. So, you want to make sure that you engage in self-care that requires structure. And it's really recommended that you come up with a self-care plan and not just do self-care as we usually do on a very last minute impulsive basis. This is, saying have a plan and stick to it, which I think is a really important lesson for all of us. And if you are a social worker, you've probably heard of SMART goals that we use with clients at times. Well, guess what? These are really good goals for ourselves. And, just to remind you, these stands for specific. So your goals are targeted in a specific area for improvement. They're measurable, so they're quantifiable, so you can monitor progress. They're attainable, which means that you can achieve them. They're relevant, so it's worth doing. It's something that you want to do, and it's time limited. So deadlines within a specific time frame. So set goals, make sure they're smart, and make sure that it's something that you can really vibe with and really put into your daily practice as a person and as a social worker. And just like any other practice skill, it has to be sustainable. And that's something I think a lot of us struggle with, is being able to sustain a self-care plan. And so there's several A strategies that can help you come up with a sustainable self-care plan. And that's accountability, awareness, and attention. So all three of these are vital for coming up with a sustainable self-care plan. I think this is probably one of the bigger points that I resonate with, because self-care for me, up until recently, has not been very sustainable. I've set very lofty goals, which is great, but when you're busy and you have a lot going on, it's better to start small and work your way up. And remember, ethically, self-care is something that we have to do now. And I would rather us start small than go big and fail. So social workers are required to engage in ethical and competent practice in pursuit of individual, family, group, and community well-being. To achieve this, we must practice in self-care that is individualized, integrated, intentional, structured, smart, and sustained. Just some myths, and then we'll do, real quick, if you've got any last minute questions, but here's some myths real quick. Self-care is all or nothing. So if you're not good at self-care, that doesn't mean that your efforts don't count or they don't matter. Self-care, just like meditation or anything, it's like a muscle, and you're going to have to work on that muscle for it to be strong and for it to work how you want it to. Self-care, requires resources that you don't have. You could do self-care any way that you want. And this doesn't require anything. Even if you just intentionally laid in bed, or you've laid in your chair outside on a nice sunny day and you just focused on your breathing for, just a few minutes, that's self-care. Self-care is optional. It's not really optional, because we've got to take care of ourselves and also our clients. And now we're ethically obligated to practice self-care. We must earn the right to practice self-care. That's ridiculous. No matter who you are, where you come from, how much money you make, or what practice setting you come from, you deserve to take care of yourself. And how that looks and how that works for you is going to vary, but you absolutely have the right to practice self-care. And self-care is anything that soothes you. So sometimes self-care, people may think that things that are not completely appropriate because it soothes you is self-care, but sometimes it could do more harm, like maybe drinking too much or smoking too much or doing things like that. And this bottom one is practicing self-care means making a choice between yourself and others. We've been taught in our society, I know I was growing up, that thinking about myself was selfish and being selfish is a bad thing. But sometimes you have to think about yourself so you can think about other people. And if anything, we are the ones that are out there helping people from all walks of life. And if you're choosing yourself, that really means that you are choosing the best version of yourself for your clients. So don't ever think that you're trying to make a decision between you or people you care about or your clients. Because if you choose you, the best version of you is going to show up and you're going to be able to help people to the best of your ability. So that is pretty much it, y'all. I was going to do a brief group discussion, and we don't have the time, and we don't have the feature on here. But does anyone have any just last minute, real quick questions?
And y'all remember, you can unmic yourselves or you can ask them in the chat room. Is that someone coming through or trying to come through? No. Well, Dr. Caldwell, we thank you. This has been great. And some folks have asked if they could have this presentation. Do you mind?
No, sure. That's fine.
If I send it out. So I'll send it out to y'all. Anyone who does the evaluation will get the presentation, and I put the survey link in again. Someone said it didn't work. Let me read it to you one last time. https://www.surveymmonkey.com/lowercase r/ all uppercase G as in girl 7 9 Q N as in not W7, and it's password protected. The password is compassion, as in I hope you will all show yourselves great compassion and self-care. And thank you so much again, Dr. Caldwell. There were so many things I'd love to discuss with you. Maybe we can get you back at another time.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, and we can do some other things, but there was so much rich content there. I wanted to talk more about, caring for yourself. If you were in the video, she said, if you were someone that had been abused or had trauma as a child, that if you were working with traumatized children, you could really, become immune to that pain. And it would seem so true. And I bet all of us, no matter what we do, carry some childhood pain and trauma with us. So we have to heal ourselves and care for ourselves, as Dr. Caldwell said, before we can care for others. Well, thank you again, everybody, for being here. I'm going to end today's session. I appreciate you. The password is case sensitive. It's compassion with an uppercase C. Uppercase C, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Chandler Caldwell, one more time for being with us. We appreciate you. And thanks to every one of you for what you do each and every day.